So the topic that we are going to discuss is digital signature. Now, traditionally, when you want to send a letter to someone, you put a signature, right? So similarly, right, in digital world, when you are sending something electronically, we need to verify authenticity to those who send this document. Right now, you are going to send me a document. It comes through, let's say, email. So how should I know it comes from you? Think about in that. So in that sense, we need a way to verify it has come from someone that we intended. So traditionally, I told you we will sign it, right? And if you look at the digital signatures, now in digital signatures, what they use is they use some mathematical technique, which we are not going to use. But this is what we call digital signature. So that will guarantee that the message coming from the intended party, right? So digital signature will give us where it is coming from, right? Status, identity, and also the status. Okay. So if you look at some countries like US, for example, they consider this as a legal binding, which means in the courts, for example, if there's something goes wrong and if you're going to courts, these documents are considered, digital documents are considered. Right. So let's write down this. Let's write down the validity of a document may depend on the signature. The validity of a document may depend on the signature put in document. This makes the receiver to trust the content in it. In digital documents, we can say digital document. Digital signatures are used to authenticate the source messages. It allows to verify the author, date, and time of signature. And the content. I'll repeat one more time. Now, the idea of a digital signature is similar to signature we put in a traditional letters. When you send a letter by putting a signature, people trust on it. Similarly, in digital documents also, we have something called digital signatures. So that digital signatures will authenticate the sources, which means it tells us who the author is and the date and time of the signature, and also the content of the document. This is not only actually digital document, sometimes even for software, right? Or a message, we can have digital signatures. Let's write down. Digital signature is a mathematical technique used to validate messages, software, and digital documents. This is also based on public key cryptography, which means asymmetric. Remember, we discussed public and private key. Right? So the mechanism I'm not going to discuss, but the idea is very simple. So you need to know what digital signature is. So simply we can say, right, digital signature is a signature you put on digital messages. And using that one, we can verify who has written the message, the date and time of the signature, and also the content. Now you are getting, it's try to answer something like this. Now, when you're getting a mail or when you're getting a message, how do you verify that the message coming from the person you are expecting the message, right? So to verify that, people are using digital signatures. Right. So with that one, we are going to talk about some issues that we have to face with data communication. So now we have just finished looking at, right, encryption and digital signature, public key, private key, also the signing. So the next thing we have to discuss the threats. What do you mean by threats? There are many things affects the system. There will be viruses, there will be trojans, there will be malware, and also phishing. Okay, so let's write down. Right, let's write down. Security threats. Let's write down. Security threat is defined as a risk that can potentially harm computer system and organizations. Right. So now we know that there are many threats. This is exactly what we are going to discuss in the topic, right? And there are many types as well. Now, for example, there are physical threats, right? That means internal, like fire, power supply, external, lightning, human, right? But non-physical ones, right? Like based on viruses, trojans, warp, spyware, keyloggers, and so on, right? There are many types of threats are available, and we should be aware of it. So let's start with some of the threats. Right, let's start with viruses then. Right, so let's start the secure threats, viruses. We have viruses. So virus is nothing but a computer program, and you know that viruses will replicate itself and it needs some other program. Okay, then worms. Computer worms. So again, computer programs and then duplicates quickly, especially in a network environment. This will congest the network traffic. Right. Third one, Trojan horse. So Trojan horse is another type of software, a computer program. Looks good, meaning like it's appear to be useful, but it will damage the system. Looks useful, but it's not. Then spyware. So that's Trojan horse. Then spyware. So the spyware is nothing but again a computer program, but will look for particular information. So for example, when you search the internet, it will can look after what you're accessing and so on. Then adware. Adware, computer program, unnecessary advertisements. So sometimes when you browse the internet, you will see that you are getting a lot of pop-ups and which are not related. This is basically as a result of adware. Then bots. What's again piece of software which actually can do a lot of things, right? So it can message it like, like robots are larger. These bots meaning very small. Very small software, and then it can collect information. Then hijacker. Then phishing. Phishing means like, sometimes, especially one of the common phishing activity is when you access to your online bank, the the website which is very similar to bank but it's not really bank shows you up a interface, and you might think that it's a bank and you can enter your credentials, and then they can steal. So this is called phishing. So it uses program to collect information. So you have to be very careful. Last one, spams. We can say they are unwanted messages, right? Unwanted messages. They are unwanted messages. Right. Now the question is how you're going to, you know, identify these threats and avoid them. So that's what we need to discuss. Okay, now we discuss. Now we have discussed use of digital signature, and now we discuss the threats. So threat posed by different way. I mean, there could be physical threats as well for the computer system, like flooding, like fire. We sometimes call physical issues, but these are normally comes as logical issues. The idea there is it happens through especially piece of software, right? Now, next thing that we need to discuss, right? So how we are going to secure them? And these are the threats, right? How do you secure them? How do you avoid them? So security, I mean, security here is how to avoid them, right? So we can use software. right? We can have software act against these issues. Likewise, there are many software available, isn't it? So let me give you some, right? Here are some of the software. Now for computer viruses, worms, Trojan horses, we can use antivirus software. Then spyware, we can have anti-spyware. Adware, we will have anti-adware, or we say pop-up blocker. Right? When you're browsing in the internet, sometimes you get pop-up advertisements. So we can install an extension, for example, in a Chrome extension, where it will actually block. Then we will have anti-hijackers. Somebody, can take over your computer, and from there they can make an attack. So it's possible with the hijackers. And then there are spam. Now in your email account, usually when you get messages, so sometimes you get a lot of unwanted message from outside parties. These are called spams. So then there's a technique called anti-spam, where it will identify any spam messages and they'll send it to there. Right? So one security aspect is use of software. The next one is firewalls. Firewall mean it could be software solution or hardware solution. Like for example, there are some software, firewall software available. You can download and install. Or in hardware, you will have things like routers, right? There will be in firewall. So what happens with the firewall? It will actually controls the traffic coming from the outside, right? So it can also allows or blocks specific the traffics, allows or block specific traffic. At the same time, nobody can access the system. If there's a firewall, right, it will act against the unauthorized access. Right. The third one is users. Right. Now we talk about the software for malicious software, firewall, and educating users. We can educate those who are using the system. Right? We can say, okay, use of passwords, right, and strong password. Then frequent change of password. Right? Remember, for example, if you want to use password, usually you will restrict somebody to come to your computer. You can use a password. But remember, when you're using a password, you should not use something which is relevant to you, like your friend's name and so on. And it should be strong password. Now, when we say strong password, usually if the word contains at least 8, we can say that, right? We can use, strong password. At least more than at 8 or more, usually we use. And not only that, you frequently change your password. For example, you can do this by every 2 weeks or every month and so on. So anyway, you can change the password. Then update antivirus, program regularly, right? So you have to change very frequently, every day. Do not use or do not download or install software from unknown or unreliable websites. You should not download or install software if you do not know from where it is coming from, right? You have to be very careful. If you're a beginner, especially, right, you have to be very careful about playing out. So don't just download the unnecessary things. Right? Use of regular backups. So keeping a copy we known as backups. Usually it depends on your every month, every week, or every hour, or like we can say synchronous, right? We can use very many ways how you can actually get these backups, right? Okay, I think this is enough. So we discussed some of the security threats. Also, we discussed some possible security measures where we can look for. Right. Now with this one, we have finished 6.11. Now we have is 6.12, which is the last one. Right. So in 6.12, we are going to talk about the ISPs, right? And technologies used connecting homework network. So let's start the new topic then. So what happens in the last session, we are going to look at internet service providers and their technologies. So we have several topics that we have to talk about under this. So I will take one at a time, and very briefly, I'm going to talk about the details, right? I will use a point form for this. The first one that we are going to look at is ISP, right? Or in long form, it says Internet Service Provider. In short, we'll say ISP. Right. Let's write down under the ISP. Okay, Putta. Right, we'll take a 5 minutes break and we'll connect again to 20. Hari putte liha kamu. So internet service provider means usually when we need to connect to the internet, we need internet service provider. Now, like Mobitel, Telecom, right? And Dialog. So all these are service providers, right? So that means it's a organization or it's institute. It provides the access in the internet services. Right. So let's start. So ISP means an organization which provides services to access, right, internet, to access the internet. So when we talk about the internet, then there are various ways that we can connect to the internet. Right? But let me write down some examples of ISPs, otherwise. Right. Right. They are giving a lot of facilities. Now they are giving us internet connections. They host. They provide email access. There are a lot of services that we need provided by the ISPs. Right. And then there are different types of services will provide, like broadband services, fiber. Right, nowadays we have fiber. So there are different services available. Right. Let's write down this. Under this, we can say DSL. Right. to connect the internet, digital subscriber lines, or we can say DSL, or asymmetric digital subscriber lines, ADSL, are used. ADSL allows more data to be sent over existing copper telephone lines. Now, early days, we have a simple telephone lines. Advantages of DSL. Now, when you compare both digital subscriber line, DSL or ADSL, there are like some differences, right? So the speed is high. Access both telephone, internet. Security is high. Right. Then advantages of ADSL. Cheaper, faster streaming. So you can see quite fast. Right. So that's about the internet service providers. Right. Now we have last two topics. The first one we need to discuss homelands. We will use private addresses and public IP addresses. Now, so far we discussed IP addresses. Private IPs. Now, so far when we discuss IP addresses, we discussed in the internet, all computers we can uniquely identify using IP address. There actually what we discuss is public IP address. Public means whenever you connect in the computer, you are getting an internet address. It's a globally unique IP address, right? So the public IP address are used identify the device public IP addresses are used to identify the globally identify the device. That is means within the world globally we need a IP address. Now then public IPs, so private IP addresses are used within the home, for example, right? Private IP addresses are used within, right, home or an organization. So these addresses will not expose to the internet, the internet directly, right? Remember this. Now when we say private, means it's private. Those who are outside from our network cannot see the private IPs. Okay, so that's what we call private IPs. Okay, last one that we need to discuss is called network address translation. Network address translation or proxies. Network address translation, or when we say, or we will say NAT, is a method to remap. Remap means you are going to change one IP address space to another.
Finished.
Right. Network address translation means we are going to change from public IP to private. Right? So let me show you a simple image. Just we'll draw and finish. Right. So the idea there is something similar to this one. Right. Now I told you within our network, what we have is private IPs. But within globally, our device, we have a public IP. Right. So then there should be a mapping from public to private, isn't it? So for example, if you look at this, we will have some private IP, and then there will be port using, let's say, and inside the public IP port, right, the values will be changed because it goes from here to here, right? So that mapping should be there. And then outside, it will be another one. Just briefly draw this one. And with this one, we actually finished the section 6. We have finished discussing data communication. We spent quite a lot of time with that one, but finally we end up with this. So let's draw this, and then we will finish this one, and then I will send you a paper, and you try the paper, and then we'll discuss the answers in the next week.